Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
Welcome back, everybody. I want to turn you back onto a wonderful book for children. And it's very different because there's lots of lessons within this book. And this is not just something the author came up with in the last year or two. This is decades in the making. And a lot of those life lessons he's gone through and put them in the book. And it's also about ecology and our animal world. I'm talking about Jack Sprout in Beaver Creek Meadow. And it also accompanied with it is a video game for kids as well. We have the author with us today. Coincidentally or not, his name is Jack. Jack Shoop joins us on the program. Welcome back. How are you?
Yeah, thanks for having me. Yeah, my name's Jack, and this is Jack Sprout right behind me.
Gotcha. Yes. Before we dig in, just to refresh everybody, Jack is what type of entity is Jack Sprout?
Well, Jack Sprout, he's one of a kind. He's started out as a seed, okay, and then halfway, that's sunflower seed, a gray striped sunflower seed like kind you eat. And halfway through his life, he got arms and legs and nose and eyes and ears. And you can see he still has his big ears, his sprout ears.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. He's part plant. He's a plant with mutations. Let's put it that way.
Gotcha.
And he had another purpose in life. He wasn't going to be a sunflower, but he didn't know that until halfway through his life. So he's a sunflower with mutations. One of a kind.
Like humans, we go through different experiences. We're social creatures. We connect with others. Same thing's going on in the animal world. We're animals as well. And in his journey within Beaver Creek Meadow, that's actually what's going on. He's meeting some of the creatures there, some of the lessons that he's taking away from those creatures and likewise. And we're going to dig, I believe, into chapter 3 today.
Right. Yeah, we're going to talk about Sawdust Miller. So I'm going to just throw some pictures here. Here's Sawdust Miller. He's a woodchuck.
Mm-hmm.
Here's Whoopi and Stretch, whooping cranes. They form the long neck shoreman union. Get it? A little play on word there.
Gotcha.
They do all the heavy lifting. And this is the hollowed out redwood tree where Sawdust Miller lives. And this is the map of Beaver Creek Meadow. And Sawdust Miller lives up here in the redwoods, and his sawmill is down here in the Eastwoods. And I dedicated the book to the redwoods. It's in my introduction. For those who've been in the redwoods, I don't need to tell you. For those who haven't been there, it's an out-of-body experience just being in amongst those trees. So I dedicated the book to the redwoods. So
beautiful.
Pretty important part.
Really, everything is about our environment and the animals within and the lessons that come from it. And I was going to ask you how Sawdust Miller got his name. Now I know. That was clear.
Yeah. He, well, when Jack went to see him, he went to the woods to find him, and he heard the saw blades singing, and he came through a clearing, and he saw this guy covered with sawdust. So he didn't have to wonder how he got his name. Yeah, you're right.
Why is this chapter 3, so poignant, maybe important to you?
Well, everybody loves trees, and a lot of people told me, Jack, you can't be cutting down trees in your story. That's terrible. You can't cut down a tree. But trees provide homes, whether they're standing or they're cut down, right? So, and trees are all over the world. They provide oxygen, and they absorb carbon dioxide, and they provide beauty and shade and cooling. And trees may be the most important plant on the earth. So everybody loves trees. They have they have their favorite tree, and trees provide fruit. So trees, pretty much most important part of the environment. So that's a big part of this book here that I'm going to read to you today. So.
Well, I think we underestimate or undervalue why trees are so important. And if you talk to people who harness energy or study and understand it, trees are a way to ground. Everything you want to be
Yeah.
grounded. Touching a tree grounds you. So does nature. Uh,
Yeah.
then we have, of course, the aspect of the exchange of oxygen and all of that, and everything we get from trees. So yeah, absolutely. So yeah, why don't we dig
Right.
in? Chapter 3.
Okay, well, where we left off with, we went and met Fred Beaver, and Fred promised to cut down some silver oak trees for Jack so he could build his house. So he went back to see Fred Beaver at his pond, and they were sitting there talking about the day that they saved the dam. And then Fred said, "There's one thing I've learned for sure," said Fred, "water always runs downhill. And sometimes a runaway log will come through and bust up my dam." So Fred and Jack knew that they would have to fix his dam many times, but he always knew that he could count on Jack to help him fix the dam. So he said, Jack said, "Okay, I got to take my logs over to a sawdust miller, have them cut into lumber. So tell me about this. Tell me about sawdust miller." And so I'm going to read a little bit here. So Fred said, "Well, sawdust lives in what he calls the heart of the forest. That way he can watch the forest grow and see what it needs to stay alive. He knows all the animals and birds that call the forest home. He knows the names of the plants and grasses and trees. He knows where all the trails go and even where the water goes after hard rains. It's also his job to cut down trees for the builders of Beaver Creek Meadow. There's always seems to be a need for good lumber, and it's very hard to keep everyone happy. So that's his job, and that's his purpose in life. So Jack goes off to find, goes down the trail in the East Woods to find Sawdust Miller. And in every story has a little adventure before he finds the character that he's looking for. So in this story, he goes to the woods and he hears the singing of the birds singing. But there's one particular bird that more beautiful song than all the others. And he stopped to listen to her, but he couldn't see her, couldn't find her because she's always hiding. But that comes up several times during the book. This special yellow canary he keeps hearing. But so he said, so he meets Sawdust Miller. He sees him behind his big saw blade, sawdust everywhere. So, like you said, like we said earlier, he didn't have to worry about how he got his name. So when he shut the saw blade down and he went to talk to Jack, Jack said hello. He says he's a friend of Fred Beavers. And Sawdust said, "Yeah, I'm a friend of Fred Beavers." And then Jack got kind of a little arrogant. He goes, "Yeah, we saved Beaver Creek from a big flood that day." Big grin on his face. And Sawdust kind of calmed him down and said, "Yeah, that's what we do around here for each other. So not that big a deal." So he asked Sawdust Miller about his job and what he does. So Sawdust leaned back and started to whine a long story. And just as you said earlier, he said, "Well, for starters, the woods and forests are alive and they keep us alive." "How do they keep us alive?" I asked. "The trees, plants, and grasses breathe like we do. They breathe in the carbon dioxide and we breathe out. We breathe in the oxygen that they breathe out. So you see, we need each other to stay alive." So, that's a short little paragraph, but it's a big, heavy paragraph. And kids learn from that. You don't have to sit there and teach them for half an hour. That's the ins and outs of how it all works. And you don't stop and think about it, but when you stop and thinking about it, if they weren't here, we weren't here. It's pretty intense. So he keeps talking about it, and he says, if we want to stay alive and growing, we have to keep our meadow alive and growing. He says, "I do the best I can. I know builders need trees for lumber. I cut down trees to make new trails." Excuse me. "I cut down trees where there are too many growing. I drag out the trees that are clogging the streams. I also take out the old, sick, and fallen down trees. And of course, I let beavers cut all the small trees they need to build their dams. So in other words, you don't cut any trees unless you've talked to Sawdust Miller. And when builders want more trees than I can give them, I take them for a walk through the woods and forest and show them why other trees need left standing. It usually works out okay. So that's his job, and he's the you don't cut any trees down unless you talk to Fred to Sawdust Miller. So he takes care of the forest. So Beaver Creek Meadow has somebody for every part, right? So Fred Beaver's in charge of the dams that we found out, and he controls the waterway for if the water gets too much, he stops up the dam, and if they need more water flowing, he lets the dam out. So he's in control of the water, and Sawdust Miller is in control of the forest. So you can't cut down any trees unless you talk to him. So he lives in the redwood forest, so he knows what's going on. So he knows what's best, and that's kind of the way that works. Beaver Creek.
Interesting how he is call it the controller of the trees. Before you're going to make any changes, you have the
Tree
consult.
controller, yeah. The tree controller, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, he's a woodchuck, and that's his job, and everybody has a job, and they all trust him because he's fair and honest. And like I say, sometimes you need. I had I had a little experience where I used to when I was working in Hawaii, I had a lot of conventions, right? So I would greet the head of the party. Big groups would come to Hawaii, and they would have their parties over there. If you sold $1 million, you get a free trip to Hawaii, that kind of thing. And one guy was walking up to me one time, and he was usually they would come and say, "Oh, we're from Ohio, and great to be here, and the beach and the sand, and it's cold back home." And that's usually their attitude. They're very happy. But one guy was walking up, and they're usually surrounded by the banquet staff. This one guy was walking up, blue jeans, not happy, all by himself, and he walked up, and we were hosting the Northwest Loggers Association. Okay,
Wow.
that's back when the spotted owl and all that was going on, and so he walked up, and I said, "Oh, are you with the Northwest Loggers Association?" And he goes, "Yeah, you got a problem with that?" You know, like, whoa, I wasn't expecting that. I said, "Well, my house is made of wood, you know." And he goes, "Oh, well, you know what?" That kind of threw him back. He didn't expect that. He says, "A lot of people don't get the connection." And that's the life that he lives, you know. So imagine loggers, lumbermen, lumberjacks in the Northeast, I mean, the Northwest, Oregon, up in there, Washington, Northern California. And here comes people that don't want tree. They were cutting it down a lot of old redwoods. That was not good.
Mm.
So that had to stop. But these people say, well, how are we going to? They wanted to stop logging it. And of course, you don't stop logging. You have to come up with a little, well, that's the habitat of this squirrel or this owl or this lizard. Or, that's a smoke screen to get it stopped. So he had been dealing with all that. So these are people's lives, they cut trees for a living, and now all of a sudden they can't cut trees. It's a big deal. So the first time I saw the redwoods, I was going from Oregon to San Francisco to fly out to Hawaii, and I had my '69 Rambler station wagon, and I parked in. I just parked along this road, but I happened to be in the redwoods. So I woke up in the morning into the redwood forest, which was unbelievable. Just I didn't know where I was in the dark, and I woke up, and they're huge, and they're falling over, and all that. And I rode down farther, and there's a big, place for breakfast. All these trucks pulled up, and I said, I'm going to pull in and have me a lumberjack breakfast. I was really excited. And I walked in there, and my hair was a little longer than it is now. And I walked in, and this, 50-year-old waitress was wiping the table, and she said, she looked at me, I had long hair. This is in 1981.
Mm.
And she goes, honey, you better go. I go, no, I'm just here for breakfast. She goes, no, I think you better go. And I got the hint, so I left. I would have got my rear end handed to me, tell you,
Um,
because that was the conflict right then.
Jack, in a different way, but in the same way, I know what you're talking about. It was just a few years after that. I went cross country from New York to California. My friend was moving. I figured I'd take the ride with him. And I think it was somewhere in Arizona, if I remember. A truck stop. We had way longer hair. We go in, we're about to order, and I'll never forget what somebody said to me. And it's around the same thing what you're saying. Uh, Older gentleman from that area said, are you going to stay or are you going to leave? And right then it was time to go.
Yeah,
You know when
yeah,
you're not welcome for whatever the reason is.
yeah.
Yeah.
I, yeah, I think I'm a nice guy and I get along with everybody, right? So I told her, no, no, no problem. She goes, no, you better go.
Mm-hmm.
She knew. There was a lot of tensions back then. There's a lot of emotion involved with force.
Sure.
And I mean, we need it. There has to be, there has to be some kind of, give ground. You got to cut trees. You got to have houses, and where are you going to get the wood from? My
Yeah.
house in Hawaii is redwood.
Wow.
It's matter of fact, it's tongue and groove redwood. The board is an inch thick. So the inside of the board's inside the house, the outside of the board's the outside of the house. You know what I mean? There's no insulation or anything like that.
My gosh.
It's called a Hicks home. All the walls are redwood.
No sheetrock, nothing like that.
No.
Oh my gosh.
Matter of fact, you know what a louver is, right? In the window.
Yeah, yeah.
The louver is about 4 times wider than a house. You know what I mean? The board, the actual board, it's an inch thick. So you don't need air conditioning. But in Hawaii, you build Mauka to the Makai Mauka. Your house, the broad side of your house faces the ocean, so the breezes come up and cools you down like that. So yeah, I have a redwood house, and I'm glad I did. But they had to stop cutting down the old redwoods.
What about, now that you're talking about it, that home with those redwood walls in Hawaii. What about the insulation factor? But let's say you want to cool it down. Obviously, it's warm there, but you want to cool down your dwelling. Does it stay cool inside?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Huh.
It's well, there's no. I mean, the hotels will have air conditioning. Some apartments have air conditioning, but other than that, a regular house, even a $5 million house, don't have air conditioning. A lot of those bigger houses on the golf course, they open up their doors. They slide their wall open. They got 20 feet of open.
Wow.
You know, so no, we the thing is, the trade winds 10 to 15 come up during the day and they go down at night. They trade. Matter of fact, if you're on the beach and you got a tiki torch flame, the before sunset, the flame will be blowing uphill. After sunset, the flame will be going toward the ocean, right?
Wow.
Because the heat of the land sucks that up during the day, and then the goes back at night. So you've got trade winds going up and down the hill. Every island's a mountain, and Big Island has 13,000-foot mountain. So yeah, the trade winds keep it's cool. It's the same temperature every day, 365 days a year. So
You're all about the environment, ecology. That's the baseline for Jack Sprout. If you could be before every child in the world right now, and tell them what you want them to know about our environment. Just you have limited time. You're in front of them. Let's say it's a sentence, a couple of sentences. What would you say?
Well, I wrote it in the back of the book.
Okay.
I wrote just exactly what you said. I can't sit down with every elementary student in the world to tell them the most important things in life, so I wrote this book. I want students to learn how to be good neighbors, make friends, do the work, and be responsible for themselves and their natural surroundings. I kind of wrote that on the back of the book because you're right. That's why am I doing this, right? You got to answer that. But um, I think that if people just realize they're not by themselves, there's other nature, there's trees, there's people around them that they have to relate to, but be responsible for yourself in some way. I mean, I know not everybody can be responsible for themselves, but if they look to themselves for the answers instead of relying on other people or other, parts of nature, I think they'd be a lot better. They'll be happier.
So for you, for this book and the character that you created, if somebody, oh, there you go. There he is. Wow.
I'm saying if people want to email me, I have if somebody buys my book on my website jackspell.com or at Amazon,
Hmm.
I have I have a supplement for the book. Like if homeschoolers would want, like if they email me jack@jacksprout.com, I will send them that supplement.
Oh, very cool. What you you haven't the character lives in the book, but you would also be open to the character being used in other forms, with approval, compensation, whatever it might be. What's your vision if somebody looked at the character and said, "Yeah, you know what? There's a lot of strength in that, for products and merchandising and things like that." What would you see the character being used for?
Well, I've been with this character a long time. Everybody loves him. Everybody, the first impression is very, very positive. So, if I was a company, and let's say I had a company and I had a children's line or whatever it was, I would put Jack Sprout in there. He would have his own line, whatever it was. It could be clothing, like the polo shirt. I got my logo on here. The
Hmm.
polo shirt had the polo guy, but you can't really see it. But that's a nice quality. That's a quality shirt. I don't know what it represents, living the high life or whatever. But if Jack Sprout was on there, people go, well, that's a quality shirt, and that person loves nature. You know what I mean? So instead of loving a polo, I don't know what it represents really, the good life or quality shirts. But if Jack Sprout was on there, they go, oh, well, that's a quality shirt, but he also loves nature.
Hmm.
So, North Face and LL Bean and all these clothing companies, they got name, but they don't have a character, right? And I think I mentioned before, like I think in the camping world tents and sleeping bags, you could have an early worm sleeping bag. You could have a Fred Beaver designed tent. Can you imagine going to campground and this kid's got a tent shaped like Fred Beaver's hut? He'd be the hit, man. Everybody'd be wanting his tent. So there's nobody doing that right now with camping. And I've been
Sure.
to campgrounds. I've been there. There's no
I haven't
logos.
seen it. Yeah, nothing like that.
So that
Just
would be open. You know, foods, any kind of food that's really, and of course, it'd have to be anything with Jack Sprout has to be totally organic.
yep,
You
yep.
know, so I think there's clothing, camping, anything in schools, food products. It's so I don't want to say it's everything because then that means it's nothing. But as far as a cartoon or a movie, I don't know. I mean, he's not a joker. He's not a clown. He's not funny. But there was like that Fern Gully or whatever it was. There was a movie 15, 20 years ago. But I definitely think there's room. And I'll tell you, whoever's out there that wants to uh, invest in Jack Sprout for their company, they're going to be very happy because the response for him is positive. Everybody loves him. Jack Sprout this, Jack Sprout that. It's a great name. Kids love the name. So if somebody wants to, or a traditional publisher, I got a picture book based on the first chapter that is very educational and very fun. And I've got a adventure story after post Beaver Creek. So there's 3 books that they can do. But I tell you, whoever's going to latch on to Jack Sprout is going to be very happy because it's a very positive image. Happy. They won't have to explain what it is.
Very wholesome, and there's a lesson there that not just kids, we all need to learn. Website is called jacksprout.com. Got any questions? Want to buy the book? Want to buy even the PC game? Go there and check it out. Jack, great having you on here again today. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Steve. I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.